Tina? Right. Good morning, students. Last time you had an introduction to urology and certain symptomatology and investigations. I hope you remember what urology is. Urology is nothing but plumbing. A urologist is a plumber. If there's any problem in the outflow system or storage system in your overhead tank, we call a plumber to see. That's how there is some problem in urination or storage, you call a urologist. That's urology. So remember that. Today, we are going to discuss about the congenital anomalies of the kidney in the ureter. Any disease is classified as congenital, traumatic, inflammatory, neoplastic, metabolic, and degenerative disorders. So today, we'll be discussing about the congenital anomalies. Before you start the congenital anomalies, you must refresh your knowledge of the embryology of the renal system. You know the kidney develops in the pelvis, comes up to the level of the renal line, normal anatomical location. So to develop, renal system develops from intermediate mesoderm. Then you know kidney develops as three: pronephros, mesonephros, and metanephros. Ultimately, the renal tissue forms from the metanephros. So, first, the kidney develops originally the pair of structures in the cervical and thoracic regions and intermediate mesoderm. And as I said, it develops in three successive stages from rostral to caudal: pronephros, mesonephros, and metanephros. Kidney doesn't develop on its own. It requires a stimulus from the developing ureteric bud. Ureteric bud develops from the Wolffian duct as an outshoot and grows up and reaches the metanephrogenic cap to induce the renal tissue. So pronephros just appear and then disappear. Mesonephros also appear as a series of excretory tubules that develop in the thoracolumbar region and disappear. Ultimately, the metanephros form the kidney in the sacral region. The final stage of kidney development, as I said, the kidney tissue develops only after an indicative signal between the metanephric mesenchyme and the ureteric bud at the caudal end of the urogenital ridge. So unless the stimulus is there, renal tissue doesn't develop, and it has two phases. One is secretory system, the other is excretory system. The ureter is a part, the symbolic of excretory system, and there should be a communication forming after the development of renal tissue. The ureteric bud induces the renal tissue, and there should be a communication developing, and lack of this leads to so many congenital abnormalities. Ureteric bud develops as an outgrowth, as a distant Wolffian duct, and approximately around 5 weeks of gestation. Ultimately, the kidney has to ascend. As you know, the adult kidney is at an angle to the vertebral column at level of the L2, L1. So this means kidney which develops in the pelvis has to ascend and rotate. So during the 5th and 6th weeks of development, the mature kidney lie in the pelvis with their hyla pointed anteriorly. The pelvis is directed anteriorly, and as the pelvis and abdomen grow, kidneys slowly move upward, and by 7th week, the hilum points medially and the kidneys are located in the abdomen. The kidney develops like this and takes a rotation. Unless it develops in the pelvis with pelvis anterior, gradually ascends and rotates. And so ultimately they are located in the abdomen. As the embryo continues to grow, the kidneys are left behind and eventually come to lie in a retroperitoneal position at the level of L1 by the 9th week of gestation. In the meantime, kidneys have completed the rotation and the hyla now face anteromedially. The normal kidney, adult kidney, is ready form, situated at the level of L1 to 3 vertebrae, rotated medially, and they are at an angle, not parallel to the vertebral column, but at an angle with the hyla pointing medially. These are the main important things in the development of the kidney you should remember. So very many congenital abnormalities are kidney described, but most of them may be asymptomatic without causing any symptoms, only diagnosed when there is a routine ultrasound performed or some other investigation done, then only it will be noticed. Many of the people are afraid when they are told that their kidneys are in the pelvis. not ascended, not in the normal site, or there is only one kidney. Many people are frustrated and they worry a lot. But all these things are, they can live normally even with these embryological abnormalities. Unless if there is only one kidney, that kidney gets disease. Otherwise, they can live a normal life. That's why people are encouraged to donate their kidneys if it is for a close relative, because one can sustain life by one kidney alone. So there are very many renal abnormalities, congenital abnormalities of kidney and ureter. Some are more important than others. One is renal agencies, renal ectopic pelvic kidney, horseshoe kidney, cross dystopia, infantile polycystic kidney, unilateral multicystic dysplastic kidney, aberrant renal vessels. This is important because aberrant renal vessels can compress the pelvic junction and cause hydronephrosis. Multiple renal arteries and veins are important when you are planning to do a transplantation. That remember that kidney can have more than one vascular supply, and you have to deal with it properly that time. Duplication, duplex kidney, duplex renal pelvis, duplex kidney and ureter, retrocaval ureter, and mega ureter are some of the ureteric abnormalities which can be there. Renal agencies, incidence is 1 in 1400. It is failure of the budding mesonephric duct. Sometimes ureter may be absent. Sometimes ureter and renal pelvis are there but no kidney. A solitary contractile kidney which is there, it hypertrophies because it takes over the function of both the kidneys. Suppose you are operating for some problem and a lump which is not investigated properly, you find it on the table in the pelvis, a mass. Think of the possibility of unilateral agencies. This has happened when I was a trainee in urology. There was a lump. We were not fortunate to have so many investigations at that time. Some barium studies were done and it was explored. On exploration, there is a lump in the right iliac fossa, and when people were trying to remove that, there was bleeding. So suddenly, we remembered it could be the single kidney, pelvic kidney, ectopic kidney. When palpated, the other side kidney was not there. Had we removed this lump, it would have ended in nephrectomy and endangered life of the patient. So remember the possibility of unilateral agencies before nephrectomy. Most of these things are asymptomatic, only noticed on chance investigation. Renal ectopia, as I said, it is due to failure of ascent of the kidney. It can be there from pelvis to abdomen at any place. The common site is pelvic brim, and the contralateral could be usually in the normal position. And this gives a differential diagnosis for a mass in the pelvis, a pelvic mass. You have to consider the different diagnosis of ectopic kidney. Horseshoe kidney is one of the important things usually asked in the examination. Horseshoe kidney is not very uncommon. It is present in 1 in 1,000 autopsies. It is present mostly in men. It is because the kidney fails to ascend beyond a limit. That is, the inferior mesenteric artery limits its ascent further. And by rotation, the medial structures are fused together at the lower and lower pole. The upper pole fusion is rare. The lower pole fusion is common. And usually it is at the fourth lumbar vertebra. And this is because the upward migration of the isthmus is prevented by the inferior mesenteric artery. So ureter angulate, this is important as an anomaly because ureter is not normally placed. Ureter pelvic junction is a funnel shaped one, and the ureter comes down straight along the transverse process vertebra. So this doesn't happen in horseshoe kidney. It has to pass over the fused isthmus. So there is some angulation. This leads to stasis, hydronephrosis, infection, stone formation, and all these complications. So you sometimes develop pelvic junction obstruction and hydronephrosis also. And this doesn't require any treatment, not hystomectomy or something like that routinely, because unless this causes some problem, that problem is solved. We used to do all these things under open operation. We have done tumor in one part of the horseshoe kidney, caliculi in the horseshoe kidney, and so many things. We used to do by open operation. So directly go to the site. Whereas in laparoscopy and robotic surgeries, this may give rise to some trouble because of the abnormal location. And a horseshoe kidney patient can have normal pregnancy. But only thing is, urological problems are more frequent compared to normal. Diagnosis is dependent on awareness. If there is a mass sometimes, a palpable mass there, and you can think of horseshoe kidney, it appears before eyes. If you do not know, it doesn't appear. This happened to me when I was a trainee, went to Vellore. They have shown me one IVP. I was discussing so many things. Ultimately, they said, it's a horseshoe kidney. Don't worry, this patient was there for 1 month. You were looking about all these things. We also could not diagnose because it was not in our brain. So this urogram, intravenous urogram, shows medially located calyces. Both lower pole calyces diverge to midline. So this is how an horseshoe kidney looks like. The upper part is away and the lower part is joined together with an anterior pelvis and ureter and abnormal multiple vessels. There is no single vessel for a horseshoe kidney. There are multiple vessels, so you'll have to be careful about that. Division of the isthmus is not required only for abdominal aortic aneurysm. Usually it doesn't help. It can also contain some nephrons, and a urologist and a urologist should preserve as many nephrons as possible. So it's not a reduction. And as I said, vascular supply is through multiple arteries and eccentric. So you must be very careful about those things when you are doing surgery. So this is an IVU, where is the calyces are directed medially. Normally it doesn't look like that, isn't it? So this is how, and at a lower level. This is how you diagnose an horseshoe kidney. So horseshoe kidney is important because it is fusion of the lower pole. Upper poles all are contributed, but rare. It level at the L4 level, and it assumes importance because it causes some complications. Otherwise, it can be asymptomatic, and the treatment for horseshoe kidney is not hysterectomy, but the diseases which it causes, like hydronephrosis, stone, or tumor, must be tackled differently. So this is not very uncommon congenital anomaly. Next is unilateral fusion. Both kidneys can be on one side and fused. That is, one kidney crosses over to the other side. So it is called crossed fused renal ectopia. Once again, it's a typical urographic picture, one kidney over the other. Both kidneys are in one line, usually fused. Ureter of the lower kidney crosses midline to enter the bladder on the contralateral side. That means ureteric opening is normal, whereas kidneys are on one side only. This you should keep in mind. Both renal pelvis lie above each other. This is how it looks like. This is the upper moiety. This is called the upper moiety, and this is called the lower moiety. So the upper moiety has pelvis and ureter there. Lower moiety has a pelvis and ureter. Pelvis of the crossed kidney faces laterally and unilateral S-shaped kidney. This is unilateral S-shaped kidney. Another important congenital problem is adult polycystic kidney. This is also not very uncommon. You see, and once you see an adult polycystic kidney, you can never forget the appearance of the kidney. It is hereditary, autosomal dominant, and why it is potentially lethal? Because it may be undiagnosed. It may not be, if it's not suspected, it will not be undiagnosed. The patient is not investigated for anything like ultrasound. It remains undiagnosed. Ultimately, patient presents in later life with renal failure, hypertension, and other problems. So then you investigate for the reason, you find adult polycystic kidney. So usually diagnosed late by standard imaging because one doesn't undergo routinely an ultrasound. Nowadays it is done, but previously it used to be done late only when indicated. Now any pain abdomen, you do an ultrasound and this polycystic kidney can be diagnosed. Manifests clinically before 30 years of age because of renal failure, hypertension, development of hypertension. These are huge kidneys, capsule distorted with cysts. It is called bosselated kidney. When you palpate a polycystic kidney, the surface is bosselated. Cysts of varying size containing clear fluid and thick brown material of coagulated blood, that is hematuria, are present in the cyst. May have associated cystic liver disease in other areas. And these cysts are important. How do these cysts develop? Cysts develop because there is failure of fusion of the secretory and excretory developmental problem. The kidneys are large or big kidneys and are studded with cysts of various sizes. This is because, as I said, defects in the development of the collecting and uniferous tubules. Blind secretory tubules that are connected to functioning glomeruli become cystic. And as the cysts enlarge, they compress the adjacent parenchyma and destroyed by ischemia and occlude normal vessels, these cysts grow in size. The result is a progressive functional impairment of the polycystic kidney. So, more common in women. Presents as an upper quadrant abdominal mass, loin pain. Hematuria could be there because of even a mild injury to the enlarged kidneys causes hematuria. That's why grandchildren should not be allowed to play on the abdomen of the grandparents. If they have polycystic kidney, even a minor thing, trauma, leads to hematuria. And infection is also common in polycystic kidneys. They develop hypertension, and the reason of this, gradually they develop renal failure. You see here, imaging mainly you suspect in ultrasound, then IVU, multiple cysts in both kidneys. It is small, normally it is concave, whereas it is smooth. Content of cyst mimic cystadenocarcinoma. Sometimes, unless you do a CT scan, it will be difficult to diagnose between a unilateral polycystic kidney and a malignancy. But polycystic kidneys are usually 95%, 96% are bilateral content. If you have a doubt about a cyst, multicystic, big cyst and a cystic malignancy, you'll have to do a cystic aspiration and cytology. And this needle aspiration doesn't result in spread of the malignancy. Urography, as I said, big, bizarre and bilateral, spider leg appearance. It's like stretched, how stretched it is, like a spider leg, stretched like a spider leg. Spider leg deformity is typical of polycystic kidney. And what is the management of the polycystic disease? The management polycystic disease is only management of renal failure. Otherwise, there is no drug which causes regression of the polycystic kidney. And correction of anemia, hypertension, and other metabolic disturbances which occur as a result of renal failure must be managed medically. Previously, this Rosing operation was suggested in textbooks to reduce tension. How many tests you can deroof and reduce tension? It is very impossible. So a very big cyst, occluding the PUJ, can be aspirated, which is being done now laparoscopically if it is required. Mostly is only a conservative management, and ultimate treatment of adult polycystic kidney is renal transplantation when he requires due to renal failure. For that, one modification could be that this usually don't do a nephrectomy of the in situ kidneys, only just place the transplanted kidney in the pelvis. Sometimes, if the abdomen is not accepting, then we have to do a nephrectomy of this thing. Otherwise, there is no need role of surgery in adult polycystic kidney, except management of renal failure by medical means or renal transplantation when it is required. This Rosing's operation is of historical importance. Of course, a very big cyst, you can always aspirate it under ultrasound guidance or deroof it with laparoscopy. Infantile polycystic kidneys are a rare presentation and it is autosomal recessive. Normal large kidneys which are present in the polycystic kidney, the etiology is same like adults are facing. They obstruct birth. So there will be difficulty in delivery of such children with infantile polycystic kidney. Usually they are stillborn or die early from renal failure. There is associated congenital anomalies of the liver and other places. Unilateral polycystic kidney should not be confused with the unilateral polycystic disease. It is separate entity, whereas polycystic kidney is a separate entity. Here, multiple cysts displace the kidney. It is much more common than it is thought. And many times I have done at least one nephrectomy when a patient presented with the unilateral polycystic disease, which was diagnosed on an investigation for insurance. So what does it cause? Why should you treat that? Because it can cause hypertension. Because unilateral thing can cause, that is non-functioning almost, is non-functioning kidney and can lead to hypertension and other problems. In such cases, it may need to be removed. And another thing is, it can be mistaken with the tumors of the kidney. And so it needs to be removed, excised. Usually when it presents in the adult age group again, then it depends on the nature. If it's causing symptomatic, like causing pain, hematuria, something like that, since it's a non-functioning kidney, it can be removed. Simple cystic cyst of the kidney, this is a very much present in routinely so many people who undergo ultrasound, And many people come for consultation for this, what to do about the cyst in the kidney. Cysts are common in adult age group and also people undergoing hemodialysis when cysts appear. Normally, it is discovered incidentally and imaging for some other reason. They say a simple cyst of 3 millimeters to 3 centimeters, the senior upper pole of the kidney, something like that. And usually they are asymptomatic. Very rarely they can cause hematuria, infection, something like that. And often symptoms, cysts can be multiple in one kidney or can be bilateral also. Bilateral cysts are also common. One such big cyst in the parapelvic region causes biliary junction obstruction and may need to be aspirated. Usually surgery is aspiration and analysis of the cyst fluid routinely for malignant cells. Unless you find that there is a lot of classification of cysts and all which are not required for an undergraduate. Rarely require treatment, as I said, if only causing severe obstruction. Simple cysts can be mistaken for diabetic cyst, which is also common in kidney. The aberrant renal vessels, 2 or more renal arteries, mostly on the left side, these are common. Usually we assume that is only one renal artery supplies one kidney, but it's not like that. There can be many more renal arteries, more than one renal artery, which is important when you are doing transplantation surgery by removing the kidney and putting it in some other place, some other body. So you have to know the renal anatomy totally before you do a transplant donor nephrectomy. You should know how many renal arteries are there, that pre-operatively itself, so that you don't find something on the table which you can manage, cannot manage. So you have to do these things first and then study, if necessary, angiogram. Mostly CT and MRI give the information. The important during surgeries, retobotom or on kidney also, open operation also, if you are doing nephrectomy, unless if you miss one artery, then there will be torrential bleeding. And this aberrant renal vessel can cause hydronephrosis by pressuring, compressing pelvic junction. So this is also important. You have to keep in mind while treating hydronephrosis. Division, what if you divide the renal artery? There is a wide wedge infarction in the areas which are supplied by that artery. So you should not just sacrifice the vessel. As I said, you have to conserve as many nephrons as possible for normal kidney function. So you cannot just cut it so that it produces infarction of the kidney. Aberrant renal veins can be divided, but not artery. As I said, it is hydronephrosis can be caused by an aberrant renal vessel. This is how, this is aberrant, this is ureter, renal artery, this is compressed, this is renal artery, aberrant renal artery, this is normal renal artery. So this is causing PUJ obstruction. So you have to keep in mind when you are treating hydronephrosis. And duplication of renal pelvis. It occurs in about 4% of the patients. This is the normal pelvic junction on one side. This is a duplicated pelvis. You see, this is the pelvis for the upper moiety coming down. This is the pelvis of the lower moiety. Both are joining here. So bifid pelvis. So this drains the upper calyces. This drains the lower calyces. And it is seen in routine urography. It doesn't cause any symptoms sometimes. Usually diagnosed by the radiology when we do for some other thing. The upper uterus join lower third of the ureter, common ureteric orifice, and a common sheath also is there, which is also of surgical importance. If opening independently to the bladder, ureter from upper pelvis opens distally and medially. This is called Wiegert-Mayer's law. This opens, comes down and doesn't come into the bladder's normal area, but somewhat lower down and medially. That's why this could be a reason of incontinence in a female, wherein the ureter opens into the vagina or distal sphincter. So the normal urinary sphincter, as long as it is opening proximal to the sphincter, there is no incontinence. But distal to the ureter, there can be incontinence. And I can recall one patient with a duplex ureter, which is coming down with necropic ureteric orifice, passing whitish urine. This was confined to this one only. This was clear urine, this was whitish urine because of the infection. As I said, it is often a chance finding in the imaging. Infection, calycless formation, PUJ obstruction are more common. One or both ureters may be dysplastic and non-functional, very rarely. may lead to reflection of the ureter, lower pole. As I said, the upper pole ureter is obstructed. Lower pole can be a reflexing ureter, and ureterocele at the upper pole ureter is also seen. So this is how these two orifices are seen in the cystoscopy. One normal location, the other one medially and lower down. So this is an ectopic ureteric orifice. Sometimes you find like this, it is puzzling to know which is one unless you have done an intravascular ureterogram before. If you are doing cystoscopy for some other reason, you find these two things, you will be puzzled. In female, the ectopic ureteric orifice drains either into the urethra below the sphincter or into the vagina, causes incontinence. It is diagnosed by history in the case of incontinence and confirmed by urography. Usually, males' ectopic ureteric orifice opens above the sphincter and are continent. So this is the thing, as I'm showing you. This is a normal kidney pituitary junction opening normally. Whereas here, the upper pole ureter comes down and opens lower down and medially. So this is a sphincter. If it opens below that, there will be incontinence because patient will be voiding normally because of the two things and also continuously irrespective of voiding. Then you have to suspect in a young girl such symptoms. You have to suspect ectopic ureteric ureter due to duplication. Ultimately, what is the treatment for this? Usually, asymptomatic harmless, you don't need to treat. If the upper moiety is really obstructed or is atrophic, then you do a partial nephrectomy. Reflexing ureter, the lower the upper part comes down and reflexing, then you need reimplantation. The ectopic ureteric orifice in females with hydronephrosis of chronically infected kidney, a portion of the kidney can be excised. Implantation of the ectopic orifice into the bladder or contralateral ureter prevents incontinence. Usually this is called ureteric reimplantation, done to promote this. And a congenital megaureter is another important thing. What is mega? Mega is big. How big? The normal diameter, to be called a megaureter, it should have more than 10 millimeters diameter. It is rare, maybe bilateral on either side, may be associated with other congenital anomalies. The problem here in megaureter is either obstruction or reflux. Both the things can occur there. And if there is functional obstruction at the lower end, there is progressive dilatation and infection. Sometimes it can be so big as to be mistaken with ureter. While operating, you can mistake a megaureter for an intestine. Unless you are sure that it is ureter, you should not do anything drastically. So, ureteric catheter appears normally. Opening is not big sometimes, but sometimes there can be, catheter passes normally, there is a functional obstruction. As I said, obstruction can always be functional or anatomical, both causes a megaureter. So if there is reflux, if the orifice is opened endoscopically, there can be reflux also. Deteriorating renal function, again, reimplantation. And sometimes it's very big that it can be trimmed, that is called tailoring. Tailoring and reimplantation. And this is another important thing, post-caval ureter. Here, the developmentally, vena cava is on the right side, aorta is on the left side. Developmentally, ureter passes, right ureter passes behind the vena cava. Sometimes they say it's not post-caval ureter, pre-ureteric cava. Sometimes they are said like that. So the importance is functional importance because it can cause obstructive symptoms. Ureter can be divided, rejoined in front of the cava using a long oblique anastomosis, spatulated anastomosis without tension. Fibrosis, the retrocaval portion, if it is fibrous, you have to excise it and join the normal uterus. This is a typical radiological appearance of retrocavity ureter. You see, here this is normal, this is a right ureter, the calyces are clubbed, showing obstruction. This is pelvis, ureter, upper ureter. This is a typical appearance of retrocavity ureter. If you see this, you will not mistake it for anything else. So the treatment is, you cut here, bring both ends and join together. That is the ureteroureterostomy after excising the atrophic segment behind the ureter. You don't do anything to the cava, you do it to the ureter only. And ureterocele is another important congenital problem where there is cystic enlargement of the intramural ureter. The ureter has a course. It starts on the pituitary junction, comes down along the transverse tip of the transverse vertebrae up to the sacroiliac joint lower pole, takes a lateral curve to the ischial spine level, then turns medially to end in the bladder. So this portion of the ureter in the bladder is called intramural ureter. Sometimes this intramural ureter, the membrane, there is a Chawla's membrane covering that embryologically. And if it doesn't disintegrate and lead a channel, always many tubes are formed as solid cells, cellular structures, wherein cells undergo, membranes disappear, and the tube forms. Is there any problem with this? This results in the atresia or Chawla's membrane persistence lead to dilatation. It's often diagnosed in adulthood and common in women. Typical adder head appearance on excretory ureterogram. If you do an IVP on the bladder film, you find this adder head appearance because of the dilatation of the terminal part of the urethra. Cyst wall is only urothelium, and cystoscopy, there's a transient cyst enlarging and collapsing as the urine flows from above. It has a very typical appearance. It distends and then collapses, distends and collapses. And normal ureteric orifice is not there, it is very much narrowed. That's how you see a uterocele. See, this is the adder hood or cobra head appearance in the cystogram. This is a case of bilateral uterocele. Ureter is here normal, mildly dilated, not severe obstruction. Whereas this is how it looks like. This is ureteric orifice, looks very small, and this is all the membrane and distended membrane over which a small thing. This appearance is very dramatic on cystoscopy, and as we observe, due to ureteric peristalsis, when the urine comes down, it bulges. When it collapses, when the urine flow is not there. So what you have to do is, endoscopically, you enlarge this opening. You will enlarge the opening. You don't need to resect this because it's only thin wall containing urothelium. You make an incision, it collapses. So then you follow. If there is recurrence, then requirement of a reimplantation is there. Otherwise, there is no need. Should be avoided unless asymptomatic. That's all. As I'm saying, if you incise it, there will be ureteric reflux, which causes more damage. Between two, obstruction and reflux, you have to choose. There is severe obstruction, you have to relieve the obstruction by doing a surgery. Endoscopic diathermy incision, as I said. Postoperative urinary reflux will be there when you cut it. But if it is within the limits, not much, not causing recurrent urinary infections, it doesn't require any reimplantation. Advanced unilateral cases with hydronephrosis or pynephrosis, nephrectomy, it's a rare thing. Usually, it is diagnosed nowadays with armamentarium. It is diagnosed any infection, recurrent urinary infection in a child, male child, or a female child, should be investigated. Any infection, you don't take it as simple urinary infection. It has to be investigated. You will definitely find a cause, and you have to treat the cause for that. Unless such things, advanced unilateral hydronephrosis, should be a rarity. It should not be a normal presentation of a kidney. Of course, previously we used to find these people with severe sepsis, a post-urethral wall patient with bilateral hydronephrosis with severe urinary sepsis. I have seen a child which was not able to move the head, so sick that just staring ahead, that's all. When you do a diversion, infection gets controlled, they become normal. So urinary infection is one which can be treated and people can recover fully. Even the renal function can be recovered to a great extent. We are coming to the bladder. Defects of the bladder. The bladder extrophy is a very ghastly thing which one can see soon after birth. It is a shock to the parents, grandparents, and other survivors. Because there's a red mass in the suprapubic area draining urine. And people who are not tuned to this, they also don't get correct advice when to do, what to do and all. So this extrophy, epispadias, usually associated with epispadias complex. This is called extrophy epispadias complex, where the anterior abdominal wall in the bladder area doesn't develop. Entire bladder mucosa stares at you with the ureteric orifices, and there is severe degree of epispadias. Epispadias means normally urethral orifice is located at the tip of the glans. And if it opens ventrally, it is called hypospadias. If it opens dorsally, it is called epispadias. The total epispadias will a flattened penis, urine coming out like that from the bladder neck and totally incontinent. The penis is broad and short, and bilateral inguinal hernia also may be present. And on X-ray, you see separation of the pubis bones. And in a female child, it is a bifid clitoris with separation of the pubic bones again. The lower central abdomen is occupied by inner surface of the posterior wall of the bladder, whose mucosal edges are fused with the skin. Urine spurts out of the wall from the urethral orifices. It's a dramatic thing you see in ectopia vesicae, urine coming out in jets through the urethral orifices. You see once, you'll never forget it. This is the ectopia vesicae. See, the penis is short and broad. This is the posterior wall of the bladder, fused with the skin here, like a fistula. And ureteric orifices are somewhere here, this and this. So urine comes out through this directly from the bladder. So this is here X-ray, the pubic bones are separated. This is what it requires immediate closure of the defect, because, and people are usually given a wrong advice that unless the child grows, it cannot be done. But before the child grows, there can be mucosal changes, a lot of changes. And many people, sometimes you see an adult also like this, because they are afraid to get operated and do not get correct advice also. Then malignancy can develop on the exposed mucous membrane. There can be some changes, epithelial changes, which can lead to malignancy. So immediately this has to be done as a first closure. Then the repair of the epispadias. This is the urethral orifice, which is on the dorsal aspect. Normally it should be somewhere here. This is dorsal aspect. This is wide, penis is wide open and very short, with curvature of the penis dorsally. That is called dorsal chordae. Chordae is curvature of the penis. That is dorsal or ventral. Ventral hypospadias, dorsal is ectopia vesicae and epispadias. So what you require is operating on these things, immediate closure and repair of the epispadias. Now, since we have time, I will put you some questions. You have to answer those things. What is the treatment of adult polycystic kidney? You can put down your answers in a chat box. And if you have any doubts, you can also do that. To recollect, the horseshoe kidney is a very important thing, because typically you have to suspect to diagnose horseshoe kidney. There is an isthmus which at the level of the L4 transverse vertebral body and upper extension going beyond by the inferior mesenteric artery. That's why the kidney doesn't move up and is level of the L4 vertebrae. The upper poles are directed, medial calyces are directed medially, the lower calyces. So you diagnose it as that. The treatment is only for complications produced by horseshoe kidney, not for horseshoe kidney itself by doing an hysterectomy. Then, adult polycystic kidney is another important thing which you should remember. Which is very important because it presents as an autosomal dominant one. Others are carriers. If they don't present, the others are carriers and equally give it to the children. So the single most thing which you can do is counseling. You can ask the patient with polycystic kidney not to have any children, because the child also will have the adult polycystic kidney and lands in trouble. So if you examine and find a polycystic kidney, the other thing you have to do is to call all the family members and do an ultrasound to find out whether there is any problem polycystic kidney there. They can be carriers without manifested disease, or they can manifest with polycystic kidney. These people should be followed for development of hypertension and development of renal failure, and they should be followed. The surgical treatment is only transplantation when required because of the renal failure. punctured cysts in these things are Rosing's operation are only to be mentioned, but they're not done normally unless there's a very serious big cyst blocking the PLV junction and causing obstruction. That cyst is aspirated under ultrasound guidance or deroofed by a laparoscopic examination. So this you have to remember because it can be a short notes for you. Horseshoe kidney can be a short notes, and simple cyst of the kidney can also be a short notes. Simple cyst is important only when there is suspicion of malignancy in a cyst. 90% of the simple cysts are only benign. They don't cause any obstruction. Again, they may not be symptomatic also. A small cyst is symptomatic. And these cysts are commonly seen on ultrasound. And also these are very common in patients undergoing hemodialysis. So, I don't know. Duplication of the renal pelvis is important when there is an ectopic ureter coming down and opening beyond the sphincter. This causes urinary incontinence in a female child who says, in spite of passing urine normally, they are having urinary leak. Then you have to investigate and find it out. Chat box. Well, you can put your doubts or any questions in the chat box. I'll try to answer that. Right? As I said, one question is here. What can be most common secondary complications due to polycystic kidney? The polycystic kidney may present only at a later age because of the development of hypertension and renal failure. So, and if you find something on the ultrasound, routine ultrasound, you have to be careful because even a simple trivial trauma can lead to severe bleeding, hypertension. The cyst can get infected and may be very difficult to treat the urinary tract infection. So these are the common complications, hemorrhage and infectional things. And a big kidney is prone for trauma. Even trivial trauma leads to gross hydronephrosis. What is yo-yo effect in duplication of the ureter? What is yo-yo? Urine coming down and going up. That is when the ureters join up at higher level, not when it's coming down. Renal transplantation, I don't know what is renal transplantation. I think for the surgical treatment of the polycystic kidney, as I told you, it is only a transplant when patient has renal failure and progressive renal failure is there. When he cannot sustain life with the native kidneys, he'll have to do a transplantation. Any more questions? If you have any doubts, we can take. I will ask you a question. What about last time we were told about what is hematuria? What is significant hematuria? Anybody can answer? Are there normally RBC in the urine? Even 1 to 2 RBC are present normally in the urine. As I've been talking about hematuria. What is hematuria? What is significant hematuria? How many? Yes, somebody has answered yes, less than 5. Why? Because about 1 million RBC are excreted in urine normally. That's why there are normally RBC found less than 5. Very good, excellent. Excellent answer, right. Then what is chyluria? The other day we have talked about chyluria. What is chyluria? Chyluria is presence of not fat in the urine. Lymphatics contain fat, absorbed fat. So there is a communication between the lymphatics and the renal lymphatics. There is presence of fat in the urine. How do you say it is fat and nothing else? Not triglycerides alone, fat. How to diagnose fat in the urine? How do you say that it is urine? I mean, fat in the urine. Not whitish appearance. All that glitters is not gold. All that is whitish is not fat. Phosphaturia also looks whitish. Fat diet before prior to test. That is one thing of precipitating when you are planning to treat. But when patient comes to you, how do you examine? You have to add fat solvents to the urine, see if the fat dissolves. That is called ether test. Ether is a fat solvent. If you add, you do it 2 tubes. In one tube you have the control. The other tube you have the add ether and shake. If the dissolves, it disappears. So you have a control to see chyluria, and the other one disappears. So that is chyluria. That's how. And also microscopy, you can see fat globules. That's the. But lab test usually we do is an ether test. Add association with, yes, Cochlearia Branchopti causes retroperitoneal fibrosis. So usually we used to assume that it is due to filariasis only and treat them with antifilarial regimen. Sometimes with chyluria, there is also hematuria. That means along with the lymphatics, there are blood vessels also. They can also communicate with that. So first thing we suspect is Cochlearia Branchopti inspection. But retroperitoneal tumors, so many things can cause chyluria. We have to be aware of that. Mostly, as I said, fat diet prior to the test, we were doing cystoscopy and injecting some irritant into the renal pelvis, say silver nitrate or betadine, something like that, so that there is fibrosis of the subcutaneous lymphatic and renal system. To identify, you have to give them fatty food to see which side the chyluria is occurring. Usually it is on the left side, but bilateral, it is also can be bilateral. So the fat food prior to the test, usually we do under local anesthesia. So while waiting also in the operating theater, we want them to eat fatty foods. So that at the time of cystoscopy, we are clear about localization of the chyluria. What is pneumaturia? Pneumaturia. Passage of gas in the urine. Why should one pass gas in the urine? As I said, one can be due to gas-forming organisms are usually not vesicourethral fistula. What is vesicourethral fistula? Vesicointestinal fistula. There is a communicative intestine which contains gas that comes into the bladder. Sometimes fecal matter also can be passed in the urine. So vesicointestinal, either colon or small bowel or whatever it is, a diverticulum of the colon, that ruptures into the bladder causes pneumaturia. And fecuria also. Fecal matter also can be passed for a very frightening thing for a patient. Is it not? That is pneumaturia. So all these things patient may say, and you have to have some idea about the symptomatology. Right? I'm giving you the first, I'm sending you what is being to be taught and the slide presentation. So you better read and come prepared with some questions, because I'll not be putting everything in the PowerPoint. I'll be leaving something for your imagination and reading. It's not a spoon feeding. So you have to read, come prepared to ask questions. All these things are given by your HOD, surgery only. The university questions which are going to be asked, short notes and all these things. Lot of urology should be taught if you go into individual things. We are not doing that. We are not just doing what is required for an undergraduate student. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. Time అయిపోయిందా?